You're in this very cohesive environment where you're getting a lot of teaching, you're learning very rapidly. Then you exit and you start going out into different businesses. And I'm sure at that point, it had to be very different. You were probably walking in, having a ton of experience with these guys, very new technology. How did you then start moving forward as an engineer and then falling into this whole position as architect?
I went to work at IBM. I was in the East Coast looking around at different jobs. Kind of have a funny story about that. Looking at a lot of the banks and a lot of jobs in New York City was all banking. That was before there were any tech companies in New York. This is before the .com. So if you wanted to work in tech or programming or anything like that with computers, you were basically working at a bank. There was few software firms, like here and there, right? There were a couple, but not like it is now. There was no Google or anything like that. I talked to one of the banks and they were asking me, the question was like, hey, what's your work environment like? And I started describing Belcor, kind of collegiate environment. You could bounce ideas off each other. It's kind of pushing and, you have luminaries and you could learn and grow and understand the field and really capture that. And they had like a great library and I would check out books and read it. Two of the guys were interviewing me. Then one of them turns to me and he said, well, I just want to tell you at, this company, we do real work. We don't do that stuff. But it was just funny, right? It was just a little bit between how it was East Coast, West Coast philosophy. Even though they were in New Jersey, it was, when I look fondly back on those days, it had a little bit of kind of see how a lot of these companies out here in California have become, because what you find out is a lot of the talent there ended up at Google and other places, which is really interesting, which is funny because I think when we talk about Spiffy and all that kind of stuff, it kind of connects back. So I love that, how it loops back into Bell Labs.
This is the area, the arena that we're talking about. How do you now create these things at scale? And so for yourself, as you went in there, computer scientist, working in lab, understanding a lot of things, how do you build and scale these things? Also, as industry is changing too, right? As we're moving from these smaller releases, from on-premise solutions, from client server, you're activating all these terminals to now you're actually living in the cloud. Then your mind starts expanding as a engineer to becoming an architect and how this works together. And then I think what you slid in there right at the last minute is, then you started thinking, well, how do companies work? How do I actually go and put companies together? This is on the career side of this conversation that we're having today. I want to understand, at what point did you start realizing, because when I think about your career, you then get this architect position at Okta and you grow and scale that company. Ultimately, you wind up at Splunk, helping us with our cloud solution in figuring out how do we make sure and secure that as we're scaling it. Then you say, I'm going to go start my own company. Like, what were you seeing and what were the skills and confidence that you had to know that it was time to go do that?
I did a couple of startups back in New York in the East Coast, and that was really eye-opening, right? But then moved out to California. I got to meet Todd and Freddie, the two co-founders of Okta, and Todd had just left Salesforce and was starting Okta, which at that point it was called Sesure. The great thing there was learning from Todd and Freddie and everybody they hired. They were able to pull in an amazing team. And it was an interesting time where it was like 2008, you'd had the market crash, a lot of layoffs, a lot of people out on looking around. We built the whole company in San Francisco, right? So everybody was hired there, but just so many lessons, so much stuff learned there on what was going on, right? And it really kind of inspires you, right? And I think that's what ends up happening. You see certain companies or certain institutions where founders come out of, they almost become like petri dishes for this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of people that started companies that came out of Salesforce. I've seen a lot of people that have come out of Okta that have started companies. For me, being early on there with that team, you really see a lot of the different aspects, right? And I think if you kind of look at yourself, hey, I'm working at IBM, I'm working at a fast growing startup, you kind of start seeing a lot of different parts of the industry that you never saw before.
What I heard you say that I think is so important for people to understand from a career perspective is we start off and we want to do our piece very well. And then it's understanding how do all of those pieces connect together. But ultimately, everybody is supporting the product. And if we can't make the product clean and simple for our users, failures, then we're not doing our job as a company. And that's one of the things that I talk about is tech employees have to be focused on ultimately the results that the company is trying to accomplish. We want to make a piece of software or an application that's solving a specific problem, easy to use, easy for people to understand. So you have to understand how everything is going to intersect and ultimately help that.